The way most companies are creating content is broken, right? Because you can't have a content calendar and just keep publishing content. You need to make sure that the content that you are creating is context ready and it moves the pipeline. The playbooks that we see today are created for 2012. That playbook does not work anymore, right? So all this that we are taught about persona, ICP, content calendar, all that is gone, right? Because buyers don't move linearly, right? So I see that there is a huge potential for us to be revenue creator, become an engine and not just activity, right? Today we see that 95% of the marketers are focused on activity, right? It's a checklist, it's a to-do list, right? So if you are one of those who are focused on pipeline acceleration and revenue, you are one of the top 5%.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Evergrow Show, and today's guest is Sajin Nair. Sajin is an award-winning marketing leader and a prolific content creator who's amassed a community of over 100,000 marketers and founders who rely on his insights to power their go-to-market, branding, and positioning. Sajin has nearly 2 decades of experience in B2B marketing with a strong focus on simplifying go-to-market systems, accelerating pipeline, and building high-performing marketing teams. Sajin, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Likewise, glad to be here.
So I'd love to kick it off and just ask a pretty general question, but what are some of the things that you're most excited about right now?
Right. So, like you, Philip, I'm very passionate about marketing, and that's what all I know, right? So, but there is a huge potential today within the marketing, right? Because the marketing as we know it is gone, right? The playbooks that we see today are created for 2012. That playbook does not work anymore, right? So all this that we are taught about persona, ICP, content calendar, all that is gone, right? Because buyers don't move linearly, right? So I see that there is a huge potential for us to be revenue creator, become an engine and not just activity. Today we see that 95% of the marketers are focused on activity. It's a checklist, it's a to-do list, right? So if you are one of those who are focused on pipeline acceleration and revenue, you are one of the top 5%. And that's really the message that I would want to deliver. I focus on revenue, focus on pipeline acceleration rather than activity, and that's the potential today.
Yeah, and it makes total sense. We spoke right before we started the recording. The days of marketing and sales, even delivery, living in silos are over, right? Every business has to look at their ecosystem holistically. If you have a very high conversion rate, but you don't have any pipeline, then you're not making any revenue. If you have a ton of pipeline, but nobody's buying, you don't have a viable business. And if you have a great pipeline and everybody's buying, but you can't deliver on the promise that you're selling, everybody's just going to churn out and ultimately you're going to have a revenue problem. So 100% agreed. It seems like the world is really shifting where revenue is no longer just on sales. It is starting to be this shared pipeline. And I think, some of the best marketers in the world are really stepping up to the plate.
Absolutely.
So as far as, kind of some of the major opportunities, right, for driving revenue and really looking at like this holistic ecosystem of businesses, there's this massive shift going on right now, as I'm sure you're aware of, especially shifting away from the old playbook of, 2012, even the old playbook of 2020. And the AI revolution, I think, is here and it's not going anywhere. But I would love to get some of your thoughts about, how is AI reshaping go-to-market and what are some of those huge opportunities right now as it comes to using AI within the marketing and the go-to-market stack?
Right, right. I mean, the first opportunity is definitely in terms of personalization and context based delivery of messaging or conversation, and whether any channel, right, whether it's on the website or otherwise, right, that's a huge potential, and most of the companies have already adopted, and that's fantastic. Everybody's got a chatbot on their website with chat gpt or some of that, so that's fantastic. But it also creates a lot of opportunity for the sales in terms of understanding the customer problem and respond in real time, because the industry that I come from, what happens today is that we gather the problem statement from the customer, and then we go back, sit with pre-sales team, then we kind of put together the content, and then we go back. So that kind of takes about sometimes 4 days, 5 days, 7 days, and you lose that momentum. But what is really shaping for us that we are able to deliver that content in real time by integrating AI into our content delivery system. So, as I'm talking to you, Philip, I could actually key in the question, and it would go through the content that we have and give me a response, help me create a presentation, help me create a sales covering letter. So there is huge potential in terms of building momentum, building that conversation, and delivering context-ready response. And then, of course, everything else, right? Cursor, it allows you to go to market with websites, landing page, lovable, and then Canva AI. There is so much AI influx with that you can use to create content. Everybody speaks about it, so I'm just gonna leave that. But I wanted to kind of talk to you about how you can really create momentum in pipeline and revenue acceleration by embedding AI into your sales motion.
Absolutely. And I think the name of the game right now is improving efficiency and 10xing output, right? I think it's basically separating out the teams, like you said, that used to really just focus on motions, right, and checking boxes, and teams that were truly delivering real output. And AI is really just amplifying those things, right? So it's not necessarily about, you know, if you're using AI tools, you have X advantage. I think everybody has the tools and everybody has the advantage. It's about what are you applying them to? And those are some really good use cases that you presented,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah. But I also want to talk a little bit, Philip, about the problem that it's also creating, right? What do I mean by that, right? Today, anybody is a churning out content like content factory, right? It's the quality of content is gone down, and everybody's got a view, everybody's got an opinion, and there's so much content flux that your audience or your buyer is kind of become numb to whatever your message, because there's so much noise out there, right? And that's really sad. So the way most companies are creating content is broken, right? Because like I said earlier, that you can't have a content calendar and just keep publishing content. You need to make sure that the content that you are creating is context ready and it moves the pipeline. Now let me give you an example, right? What do I mean by that? Now, let's say a company is funded Series B or Series C. Now, can you write a piece of content that talks about the mistakes that a Series B funded companies do? Or if you are a Series B funded company, what are the three things that you need to do? So basically what I'm trying to say is that every content that you create need to have an impact on pipeline and acceleration. And most content leaders are not thinking about it. Most content leaders today just keying in the prompt and then churning out content like a content calendar, and without really leveraging AI to its full potential. That's not the use of AI, right? If you're doing that, then most companies don't need a content leader, right? So that's really sad when I see that a lot of content that's put out is doesn't really meet standard, doesn't really move accelerate, or doesn't really move the pipeline.
yeah, and I think, to the point that we were talking about earlier, when everybody has access to these tools, it's no longer a barrier to entry. Anybody can produce graphics, anybody can churn out white papers and PDFs. So the playing field has really leveled. And I think some of like the super, super unique and interesting things that I've been seeing is maybe customer specific content, right? So people are using tools like Gamma to customize sales decks and customize white papers for every single target customer in their pipeline. Or just getting a few inputs, like you said earlier, you could be on a live call. As soon as you jump off the call, you have Granola or Fathom or whatever transcriber tool you're using, feed that into your custom GPT, generate the output, throw that into Gamma, create a deck, and then your sales follow up isn't just a couple of checkboxes or a couple of action items. It's an MVP potentially of a product or an MVP of whatever your solution looks like. So I think it's that creative use of AI that is really starting to differentiate the signal from the noise. And I think
Right,
the best players in the game, the ones that are seeing the most benefit from it, are the ones that are implementing it that way.
right.
Absolutely. So in regards to, I mean, I love that you kind of went into some of the cons and the downsides, because I was going to ask you about that. Do you have any fears potentially or hesitations about this new AI forward world and kind of how it's reshaping the landscape, and what might some of those be?
See, I'm excited about the potential, but like I spoke a little while ago, that there's too much noise that's created because of ease with which you can create content, and you don't have anything to say, but still you create content because the content calendar says that you have to publish one blog post per week. And that's something that I'm against. If you don't have anything to say, then don't say it, right? But make sure that whatever you are saying, as a creator, or as a B2B marketer. If you're a B2B marketer, then you have to make sure that the content that you create moves the pipeline, creates an impact for sales team, creates an impact for the organization. Don't look at it like an activity. And my only fear is that a lot of content leaders, a lot of marketing leaders are just reducing it to an activity, right? And they are not creating that momentum. They become lazy, if you will. So that's the only downside that I'm scared of.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I mean, the status quo will just absolutely not work anymore, you know? When everybody has the same advantages and everybody has the same tools, it's the best application and the best usage of the tools that's really going to win. And I guess speaking about, being adapting to tools and being open to change, I mean, you and I are clearly fortunate, right? We've been in the game for a long time. We have our networks, we have our track record, but for anybody that's just thinking about kind of coming into marketing or becoming a marketer or kind of growing a career in the marketing and growth and go to market space, what are some of the things that people should be focusing on? And is it different than, what you would suggest to somebody even 3 years ago?
Right. For somebody who's starting a career in marketing, I would really hope that they get to work with a good marketing leader, because in the early days, who you work with can really make or break your career, right? And somebody who challenges status quo, somebody who is willing to throw away the old playbook and understand the nuances of today's, somebody who can groom and mentor. That's what you should look for, and not really a big company or a small company. It doesn't really matter. It has to be somebody who can mentor you and tell you that the marketing in 2020 was very different from what we need to do today. There's a lot of noise today. All the old playbooks you should throw away, and then, because marketing lived in slides during that time, right? Marketing lived in presentations that time, whether it's a GTM or a buyer persona, or lead dashboard or reporting or anything like that. And a lot of marketing leaders are still living in that world, right? And that's why I keep focusing on building this skill set, which is basically the revenue acceleration and the pipeline acceleration and all of that. I wasn't always like this, right? I was like all the other marketing leaders who used to think about MQL, SQL. So I have my demons, but my current company really pushed me to think from a revenue and pipeline acceleration, and that was significant for my growth and development and all, and I'm thankful for that.
Absolutely. And it's so important. I love that you touched on kind of having the mentorship, right? Having the network around you. And I think that's actually becoming increasingly more important as time goes on because we're kind of moving into this era of, well, now everybody's got an LLM in their pocket. Everybody has, a personal advisor, so to speak. And I think actually the in real life human connection is something that a lot of folks, just because we as a species are so innately grounded in having that real, human to human connection, that the further that we move away from it, the more increasingly important it becomes. And I'm seeing that actually play out as a trend as well, that, companies are putting a huge emphasis on events and in person activations and things like that. So, in this kind of shifting landscape and in this world, what are some of the trends that you think we're gonna see play out in the next 3 to 5 years? And obviously, it's a huge challenge to predict because the world is changing so fast, but would love to get your thoughts on, like, what the future might look like.
Right, right. For me, Philip, I think that any marketer who is able to identify prospects and customers who are currently in the market for looking for services and products, that's the skill set that really want, right? Because I have been an outbound specialist myself, right? I started my career as an inside sales guy, which means I used to do a lot of cold calling and then convert them into leads and prospects and all that. But what I've seen is that the conversion from outbound is low, right? Because they're not ready, right? You're pushing them for readiness, but nothing has changed in their organization to suddenly start talking. Of course, you made a call and then they received a call. The interest level peaked. They want to know what you're doing and all that. But if nothing changed in their organization, then they are not going to buy from you. And what do I mean by that, right? Something needs to happen in their organization. So a new CMO joins, a new sales head joins, or there is a security breach, or there's a vendor consolidation, or they are growing fast, or something should happen in that organization for them to trigger buying. The buyer, the way you see it, like when I say you, I don't mean you, but I'm just saying, like, awareness, consideration, decision, it doesn't move like that. It's never linear like that, right? So just because you create content like that, the buyer doesn't move like that, right? So you need to be able to have this unique ability to look at your accounts and see where the momentum is. And as a marketer, if you are able to see where the momentum is and then approach them and then move them through the sales cycle, then you will have phenomenal success. And that's what really I would say the trend is going to be, from identifying this intent, go beyond the intent and signals and all that, right? And of course, from a event perspective, we know there are 30 plus channels today, right? Whether it's partnership, alliances, events, CEO, inbound, podcast, and all of that is there, and that's continued to be going to be there. And inbound leads are always the best when the prospects and customers are seeking out for you. The conversion is so much better, and even the leads move faster in the pipeline and all that. So if you are able to attract the right kind of audience and customers, you are better than other 90% of the marketing leaders. So just focus on these two areas, and I think you'll be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a good point is like, I think the tool set will continue to change. Maybe even the channel mix will continue to change, but I love that you mentioned that basically sticking to the fundamentals and the first principles of you know where to find your customers, you know how to nail the timing of reaching out to those customers, and you know how to orchestrate that journey in a way that is meaningful. And, I'm a huge proponent of adding value throughout the funnel. I think you touched on it a couple of times where if you're just shipping content to ship content, it is going to be so quickly ignored. And I think the more that we as marketers try to nail that across the board is find the right customer, find the right timing, find the best messaging and the best approach to get it to them, and then find a way to add value. Couldn't agree more that that is absolutely the
Absolutely.
winning formula. As far as just, specifics, I would love to ask about some of the tools that you're really using in your tool stack, whether it's, AI tools or something that's tried and true. Would love to learn a little bit more about like what's really been working well for you.
Sure. So we of course use tools like Lovable to create whether it's landing page or some of the marketing content, and then we definitely lean on ChatGPT, the paid version, including the codex and all that. But we also use the Copilot. I mean, as a company, right? But across the marketing tech, I think we are happy with the tools like Salesforce, and some of these tools are integrated with AI and solutions, so that gives us the ability to respond faster, better, and context ready, right? In the past also we have used some of the sales enablement tools and all that. So that's where we are. From a list building, of course there are a lot of options, whether you want to talk about Apollo or Zoom Info, Lucia, or whatever, to kind of identify in market segments like I was talking earlier, right? What is happening, what is triggering your target audience, right? Did they receive a VC funding, they hire somebody, or look at some of those tools. That's what we are doing, from development to design to list building. But I can answer any specific question if you have.
Yeah, for sure. I think especially like further down the funnel, right?
Right,
So, you kind of have your whole sort of setup, right? Where the
right,
ecosystem looks like you're building your list, then you're clearing up your list, then you're actually going out and doing the
right,
prospecting, and then there's like the lower funnel. Is there anything specific that has been crushing it for you on like the outbound prospecting as
right.
well as kind of further down the funnel?
Outbound prospecting, the example that I spoke to you earlier, is a custom solution. We are an IT services company, so we kind of created a custom IT solution that kind of sits on top of the content, knowledge management that we have, and then that kind of helps our sales and marketing from creating content, content generation, documentation, all of that. So we don't really buy use a third party for that. Of course, for CRM and marketing automation and design and all that, we use various tools like I mentioned, whether it's Canva or whether it's Lovable or whether it's Photo Adobe or whatever that is, right? But from a sales enablement perspective, we use our own custom solution.
I love that. That is such a huge advantage when you're able to in-house certain softwares, and then that way you're not trying to tailor an existing tool to your workflow. You are building a tool around your workflow, which I'm sure
Right,
has massive, massive advantages. So
right.
kudos to you on that. That is awesome. I think every marketer immediately became jealous. Like, damn, I wish my team would build a tool for me to use.
It was actually a vision from my leadership team and all that. And of course, I was part of the execution team, but I was just happy that the vision really came from the founders, and that's something that I want to touch on that, because I see that in a lot of organization, marketing is an afterthought. A lot of CEOs says that CEOs discuss marketing at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, just when their day is about to end, right? Or they discuss it on the weekend. But there are very few companies where it is marketing first, right? And because they understand the value that marketing adds over long term, right? And it's also how the marketers respond to that, right? Whether the marketer is also looking at like an activity or whether he's focusing on the outcome and all that. So I can take a lot of credit for that, but I'm just happy to be part of the team.
Yeah, of course. And actually, that's a really interesting point. I think actually, with this shift of effectively the cost of building is really moving to zero
Right.
effectively over time. It's going to be one of those graphs where it never quite touches zero, but it's getting very close. And I think actually in kind of this new era, and I think moving forward, there's going to be this huge drastic shift to marketing, from marketing being an afterthought to marketing actually being one of the biggest moats that a business can build around itself.
Absolutely.
If you ship a tool, there's
Right.
going to be 20 copycats the next
Right.
day, and everybody is going to be,
Right.
trying to have their own
Right.
approaches to go to
Right.
market. but I think the company that wins distribution is the company that wins that core business. So I do think there's this huge shift happening right now, which is
Right,
interesting
right,
to see.
right.
Well, the beautiful thing is I think there's never been a better time to get into marketing. So I think, you know,
Absolutely.
you and I are definitely some of the fortunate ones, and
Right,
anybody that's really thinking about, what industries are safe, what careers are safe, what should I do that's not going to get replaced by AI?
right.
I truly do think, and I'm a huge believer in the fact that marketing is going to be one, especially creative marketing and outcomes-based marketing is
Correct,
definitely one
correct,
that's going to
correct.
stick around for
Correct.
sure.
Because if you are not focused on outcome, if you're not focused on creative, then you are already lost it, right? Before it even started, right? And there's so many marketers today who have not scaled, and that's a problem, right? And that's why I say that people who are coming into marketing today need to make sure that they're working with right companies and right marketing leaders, so that they learn the right tricks. And because the marketing is broken as it is today, there are a lot of this bogus, outdated tactics, and you don't want to learn that in 2025. So you want to make sure that you learn what works in 2025. And sometimes the marketing leaders of yesterday, they don't know that, right? Even the changes that even the AI is making and all that, they know, but they haven't learned it, they haven't upskill themselves. So you really want to make sure that if you're coming in today, just make sure that are working with quality people.
Absolutely. And I think also to your point, there's so much outdated information, but we talked about this right before we started the recording of the call. There's so much outdated information, but then there's also so much information that's just not true. For
Right.
every 10 posts on LinkedIn, 9 out of 10 of them are about
Absolutely.
how
Absolutely.
somebody makes their money overnight with N8N or how this
Absolutely.
automation, changed the game for them. I think people, coming onto these platforms and trying to learn about what's working, what's not working, they're getting so radically misled that
Right.
two things happen. One, they think it's all about tools and it's not about the creativity or the strategy or the fundamentals. And
Right.
then two, they get completely misled as far as the expectations. They're like, oh, I just need to turn on this one automation and all of a sudden we're in business and everything's fixed. So I would love to get your perspective or your advice on what would you say to people who are online, who are looking for information, who are trying to understand how the world is shifting. What should they focus on and how do they really clear the signal from the noise?
Right. It's very difficult, right? Because like I said, marketing as such is broken, and there's a lot of garbage out there, and it's not easy to separate truth from the myth versus reality, or truth versus fiction, and all that, right? But what I would really say is that focus on the outcomes, right? And 70% of your energy should be spent on what's working, and maybe the remaining 20-30% you experiment to see what can work for you. The same company in or the same industry, two companies could have entirely different channels and different strategy that could work. So just because a strategy or a tactic works for company A in the same industry doesn't mean that it would work for company B also. So it depends on your marketing skill set internally, your creativity internally, and your sales team, your leadership, your solution engineering team. You have to make sure that your tactic is something that can pull it off, right?
That is such sound advice. I mean, focus on your core competencies and your strengths, work with what you have. Try to be
Right,
cognizant and realistic about, is this thing going to work just because it's working for somebody else? Or is this thing going to work because we as a company have the resources to make this thing work? I
exactly.
absolutely love that. I think that automatically filters out 99% of the bullshit and will get people to like truly focus on what matters. Pareto's
Right,
principle, right?
right, right, right.
I want to ask kind of a little bit of a, out of left field question, but I think this is super interesting. If you can give one piece of advice to every single founder and marketer in the entire world, what would that piece of advice be?
Right. Throw away all the old, outdated playbook. Whatever doesn't work, just throw it away, and then make sure that your playbook is designed for 2026. Right. Your marketing should not live on slides and PowerPoint presentations. Right. In a world where everything is changing in 10 weeks, 12 weeks, you cannot have like a targets list that only gets refurbishes every year, right? I mean, or every April or every January or something like that. So I would just say that just take a look at everything that you're doing, challenge the status quo, and be open to throw away the old outdated playbook, and you don't have to answer anybody, right? You are the master of your destiny.
I love that. I hope everybody pauses the video, rewinds that, and then watches that again because that is so, so true. I really appreciate that sentiment. It's been such a pleasure having you on. I do want to ask if people want to follow you or follow your journey or, see your content, where should they look?
They should definitely look at YouTube. I have a channel there, Anti Marketing with Sajin Nair, and that's the best place where I share my framework and all the lessons that I have learned, I'm learning, and all the mistakes that I have made and I'm making, right? And I think that's the best place. And then, of course, you can connect with me on LinkedIn and on my newsletter. So that's where it goes.
And for all those folks listening, we're going to link those in the show notes. So stay tuned.
Sure.
Sajin, what an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed this chat. I appreciate it. And I can't wait to publish this so people can just adjust accordingly because I think you dropped so many gems and I highly appreciate that.
Likewise. Nice talking to you. Nice to meet you. It is absolute fun to talk to somebody who shares the same passion in marketing. It's great.
Awesome. Well, have a great day.